Good morning, everybody. This is Patrick from Vicious Computers, and welcome to a new Steam Deck video. Today, we're going to be doing some benchmarks. We're going to be testing something that could be true or false, and it's a free performance improvement for the Steam Deck if you're gaming within Windows. Now, what we have pulled up on screen now is GPU-Z, and I wanted to point out one thing here, which is the memory for the GPU is currently at 1 gigabyte. This is called the UMA buffer, and if you go into the BIOS for the Steam Deck, you can change this value. It's set to a default of 1 gigabyte, but we can bring it up to 4 gigabytes. Being that this is an integrated graphics package, it doesn't have its own dedicated memory. It actually shares with the system memory. So what we want to do is allocate more of the system memory to the graphics card and see if it gives us better performance. Now, there's been some people out there saying it definitely improves the performance, but I haven't personally seen the benchmarks and such really to back that up. So in this video, we're going to run through a series of benchmarks. I have quite a few I've downloaded. We're going to run right now at the default of 1 gigabyte, see what kind of numbers we get. In the middle of the video, we'll show you how to get into the BIOS to make this change to the setting, and then we'll run the benchmarks again and see how we compare. So I'll put the markers, the time code down in the description, so that way you can kind of skip ahead if you want to just get to certain parts. And we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get things started with our Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker benchmark. So I spent the better part of yesterday trying to get the on-screen sensors going so we can watch those extra statistics. And in addition to that, have, of course, the benchmark results. So for the most part, I'm just going to be quiet and let these things run. And this is, of course, the 1 gigabyte default setting. So nothing has changed. We're at a bone stock Windows setup right now. All right, Final Fantasy's benchmark has completed. That was a fairly long one. It looks like we're going to check in with the time. We'll record the score on this one, 7,586. So put that on a spreadsheet and we'll mark it for our check against the 4 gigabyte change later. All right, next up is going to be the Resident Evil 6 benchmark tool. So we've got that starting off right now. We'll see how long this one runs. I haven't run this one yet. It's just interesting to be able to just watch the Steam Deck do its thing here too, just to see how much performance the Steam Deck actually can give us. And this is default settings. Nothing's been changed yet. And running in Windows, where we think that the Steam Deck might not be as efficient as it is in the Steam OS. All right, that was a nice short benchmark. Our score of 7,140, and apparently that's a rank of an S on this benchmark. All right, next up we have the Street Fighter V Championship Edition benchmark. All right, our scores came in an average of 35.79 FPS. All right, we're back, and we're going to run a default settings benchmark now for Rise of the Tomb Raider. So let's get that one started. And that finished up. Looks like we got, let's record these numbers here. 44.49 frames per second as our average. All right, here we are. We're now running Horizon Zero Dawn, all the default settings that come up for the Steam Deck. One thing you get is a pop-up message that warns you that this game requires at least 3 gigabytes of video RAM, and it lets you run it anyways. But it should be interesting to see once we increase the video RAM that we don't see that error anymore. And of course, the most important part of all these tests is to see if we actually get better scores. So let's go ahead and start our benchmark for this one. right, we've checked in. It looks like it didn't quite read the average and everything quite right. There's some errors in here. We have a max of 61, but the thing we'll record here for the sake of our benchmarks is a score of 4,330. All right, everybody, here we are. We're now getting to the point where I'm going to show you the steps on how to actually change the UMA buffer. It's fairly easy. All you need to do is hold the volume up button and keep holding it while you press the power button one time to turn on the unit. It'll take you into the BIOS here where you have 4 options. The settings for the BIOS is the bottom right icon. So you can just use the D-pad or you can use a mouse and move over to the settings. Now you get a list of options and it's a nice little graphic interface. If we just go down to the advanced section and then go over using the right D-pad, the UMA buffer setting is the second from the last, and you'll see it's set to a default of 1 gigabyte. Clicking the A button or again using your mouse, you should be able to now get that selection, and you can toggle it down to 4 gigabytes. Hit the A button again to accept that change, and now we need to tab back over to the main options and go to exit. From the exit options, make sure you say exit saving changes, and that makes all the changes you make inside of the BIOS actually take effect. And then the system's going to restart and those changes will now take effect. Okay, we're back for our second segment. We should have just had a little clip inserted for how to change the buffer size from 1 gigabyte, which is the default, to 4 gigabytes. Let's go verify that change real quick with GPU-Z as we did at the beginning. And now we can see that the memory is 4 gigabytes for the video card. So let's see if it actually makes a difference in our performance numbers. The first benchmark we ran last time was the Final Fantasy one. So let's go into that one. The previous score was 7,586 on this one. Okay, our first test is done. We're checking in after Final Fantasy has finished, a score of 7,651. I'm just going to write this down and we'll do the comparison and the conclusion when we run all the benchmarks at the end. All right, welcome back. We're now on Resident Evil 6 and it's time to start that benchmark. All right, we just finished Resident Evil, a score of 7,223. So we'll record that and we'll compare it at the end. All right, we've just kicked off the Street Fighter V benchmark. So we'll let this run through and see what we get. Okay, our Street Fighter V benchmark has completed. The score that we recorded last time was our average frames per second, so this time we got 35.99 frames per second. Okay, here we are with our Tomb Raider benchmark. We're going to go ahead and let this run through and see what kind of results we get. All right, that's a fairly short one and it's completed. We recorded last time the average FPS, so this time we got 41.67. And here we are with our last benchmark. This is Horizon Zero Dawn. Let's go ahead and kick this one off. Okay, we just finished Horizon Zero Dawn's benchmark. Our score for this one, 4,328. So we'll go record this. I'm going to compile all of the data and come back and see you with our conclusion. Hello everybody and welcome back to our conclusion section. So I've taken all of the videos that we previously recorded for the benchmarks, put them in the timeline in my video editor so I can start making this video. And this gives me a chance to tab back and forth between the 1 gigabyte and the 4 gigabyte test to kind of give you an idea of what I expected to see and what our results look like. So one thing to keep in mind is the integrated graphics are sharing system memory. They don't have like their own dedicated memory that they're just like magically hiding away here and we're unlocking it. So the default setting of 1 gigabyte might have been there for a reason. And everyone I've seen making tutorials on, hey, go increase this. I don't know why Valve set it to 1 gigabyte and you'll get better performance. You need to go make this change. I'm not sure they tested it out the same way that we did here today. Because of course, if we give more memory to the graphics card, first of all, it's not onboard graphics memory, so it's not going to be as high of a performance as dedicated GPU memory, but we're also taking away system memory. So let's go ahead and take a look now. I'm going to tab through our first benchmark, which was the Final Fantasy one. You can see the GPU memory is maxed out. It's 995 megabytes, aka 1 gigabyte. System RAM is about 6.5 gigabytes. I'll tab around a couple of other places because it does fluctuate a little bit here and there, but you can see it pretty much stays consistent, maxing out that 1 gigabyte and anywhere from like about 6 gigabytes of system memory on average. Now if we jump over to the 4 gigabyte benchmark, we see we've got more GPU memory being used now, 1.2 gigabytes, and our system memory has gone down a little bit and now under 5 gigabytes of usage. The next benchmark, this was Resident Evil 6. The GPU memory, as you can see, is not even quite maxing out here. Less than a gig, it jumps up to almost a gig of usage, and we're floating around 5 gigabytes of system memory. On the change to 4 gigabytes, we're still not using any of that extra GPU memory. It's still under a gig, but we've reduced our system memory usage. Street Fighter, unfortunately, the performance benchmarks wouldn't show up on that one. We'll jump over to the Tombraider. 1 gigabyte, maxing out our GPU memory, and about 8, 10, 9, so almost 10 gigabytes of system memory. If we go over to the 4 gigabyte test, we now see that we've reduced the system memory dramatically, and we're using more of that GPU memory, up to 3 gigabytes worth. And then the last test, this was Horizon. We're maxing out that 1 gigabyte of video memory, and we're using every bit of the system memory, 13, 14 gigabytes, 14 gigabytes, 14 gigabytes. Look what happens when we jump over to the 5 gigabyte test. We're using more GPU memory. It's up to 3 gigabytes, but we've reduced the system memory down to 11. Same thing here, 4 gigabytes, reduced it down to 11 or 12. This is consistent, so we're seeing that this game is maxing out everything available to it. So it's either maxing out the GPU memory or the system memory. So by making that change, we have now made the GPU memory completely maxed out at 4 gigabytes, but reduced the amount of system memory available to the game. How does that all come together when it comes to our scores? So let's pull up our scores. Final Fantasy Endwalker with 1 gigabyte was 7,586. When we increased it to 4 gigabytes, it was 7,651. So only a 65 point gain there, which is almost nothing. Resident Evil 6, 7,140. It went up to 7,223. So it increased by 83 points, which is almost nothing. Street Fighter, we only had the frames per second. 35.79 frames per second went to 35.99 frames per second, which is 0.2 frames per second, which is basically nothing. Tombraider, 44.49 frames per second, actually dropped down to 41.67 frames per second. So we lost 2.82 frames per second, which is, I wouldn't say significant, but the biggest change we've seen so far, but a change for the negative, for the worse. And then Horizon, 4,330 points to 4,328. It lost 2 points. That was a negative, but however, that's a small amount where it's basically nothing. So you can see based on my testing today that I can't quite agree with all the other YouTube videos out there that are saying going and making this change is a free hidden performance boost. Based on actual testing and benchmarks, we saw that we had pretty much no performance boost and sometimes even had a performance loss. However, it doesn't mean it's not worth doing because there are some games that just want more video memory. One of them, it was either Tombraider or Horizon, warned us that we only had 1 gigabyte of video memory, and it asked us if we wanted to run the game anyways. If you ran into a game that has a hard requirement for more memory, it maybe wouldn't let you proceed without this change. So it did run without making the change, just about the same, but making the change makes that issue go away. The other thing I saw mentioned is frame pacing. So perhaps you don't get a performance boost with frames per second, but the frame pacing becomes better. That's why we had the frame pacing graphs on all of the benchmarks. Now, I haven't analyzed each and every one of them in hard detail, but I didn't see any major differences. Now, of course, everything can be game dependent, and maybe there's a game out there that's just going to run better if you make this change. And maybe there's going to be some games out there that run worse with this change. So that's why we put together the test, so you can see for yourself and choose for yourself. But I at least feel like I debunked the free performance boost benefit that's being advertised out there. So once again, this was Patrick from Vicious Computers. I hope everybody enjoyed this video, found it both entertaining and educational. And I look forward to seeing you back for some future videos. So please, for all the time it takes to make these, I would appreciate the thumbs up so more people can find it on YouTube. And I'll see you next time.